this video I'm going to go over the basics of a layout table. So I'll go ahead and add a layout table to my UI. And first thing to notice is that a table is composed of rows and columns. Every child of the table will be an element of one row and one column, and will get the entire space available to that table cell. So to illustrate this, I will go ahead and add a layout sprite and set up my sprite. And you can see it gets this layout table element script, and it defines the row and column that this element is a part of. And since there's only one row and column, it's getting the entire screen. If I go back to the table and add a row, you can see it gets split in half, and so I can duplicate this sprite and put it in the second row. It should be noted that rows and columns are indexed starting at 0, and each one gets half the screen. If I add another column, I'll have quadrants. So I'll go ahead and create two more sprites. Put one in the bottom right, and put the other in the upper right. So there are three ways you can size rows and columns. It's defined by this sizing behavior. So the first is proportional, which is the default. And what that does is size the row or column relative to the other rows and columns in the control. So a height or width of 0 is equivalent to 1 for proportional. So if I were to set these to 1, they're going to be the same. Now if I set this top row to 2, it will get twice as much space as the other rows, or rather, as rows set to 1. And so you'll see that it's 2/3 of the space, and this bottom one gets 1/3 of the space. Alright, let's go and take a look at auto. So what auto does is make the row or column have a height or width equal to the amount of space needed to display its contents. So in this case, the shoulder pad is a larger natural height than the dark box, and so it's defining the height of this row. If I go and set the first column to auto, you can see that the shoulder pad is now down to its kind of natural size, and everything else has been sized to fit. Height and width have no impact on auto sizing behavior. The last behavior is absolute, and this just allows you to set an absolute pixel size for the row or column. So I can set this to 300 pixels, and it will always be 300 pixels tall. So that's how rows and columns get their size. Now the last property here is called size group, and to show that off I'm going to have to create a new table. So I'm going to remove a row and remove two of these sprites and put this one over in that row, or that column. I'm going to set this to auto so that they are as tall as they need to be. Alright, so I'm going to make a stacking panel so that these tables will be on top of each other, add this table to the stacking panel, and create a new table. It's going to have two columns and a couple sprites as well. So set these sprites up. Oops. Duplicate, not save. Alright, so if we go back and set the first column to auto, you'll see that it gets shrunk down really small. And what we really want is it to be the same width as this first column. So if we set the size group to a column, and go up and set the size group of this first one here to a column, you'll notice that now they share the same size. So this won't work if the sizing behavior is proportional, but if they're both auto, sizing will match up. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the layout table. Um, yes, this last example was a trivial example of using size group, but the use case is kind of having an items control that has a table with size group set as its template, and so you'll have um, one table that may define the headers to some columns of a set of tables that are generated by an items control. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.